Hello everybody and welcome to this Thursday's edition of Trending. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Gareth. Today's show, as always, is brought to you by Red Life Therapy. For healing at a cellular level, head over to redlifedevices.com and use the code Ickonic for 10% off all Red Light devices. Now, before we get started on a trending story, Jay's just got an email.
Yeah, it's quite a funny one, I'm not going to lie. So, as always, as I'm sure you do, when you get up in the morning, go straight on your email, straight on the internet, see what's, usually see who Israel invaded.
See if we're in trouble for saying.
Yeah, exactly. So, I've had this email, right? This is from the Department of, basically the Migration Service in Australia. Now, many of you that are subscribed to this channel and follow David's work will know that he was banned from Australia in 2019. We were literally, me and him were sat at LAX airport a couple of hours before flying down to Melbourne and they cancelled his visa. Anyway, we then put in an appeal through a lawyer and today...
6 years later.
6 years later, we've had a reply. So this is hilarious, right? Dear David Vaughan Icke, on the 20th of February 2019, you were notified that your temporary activity visa was... that was granted on the 13th of September 2018 had been cancelled. You responded to this letter on the 23rd of February and 19th of March. After considering your response, I've decided not to revoke the cancellation of your visa. A copy of this decision is attached, and it's from someone called David, doesn't go into detail of his second name, and a position number at the Department of Home Affairs in Melbourne.
Well, at least it can't be, accused that he just basically refused it offhand, because he's taken 5 years.
He's taken 5 years
to think about it.
There's been 2 new prime ministers in Australia in between.
What a
literally
joke it
insane.
is.
So that just sums it up. That's quite funny. I saw, as soon as I saw the email this morning, Department of Home Office Australia, I was like, what the hell? I haven't applied for anything. What have I done? And then so that came on Christmas Eve, and the lawyers have just forwarded it to me. So sorry, Dad, if you're watching, you're not going to Sydney Harbour Bridge anytime soon.
There we go. He's been holding on to that for 5 years. 5 years. It's just... Anyway, right, okay. So trending stories. Gaza Ceasefire. That was announced yesterday after 16 months of death and destruction. A ceasefire has been announced between Hamas and Israel, right? Which on the face of it, that's a good thing, obviously. Yeah, that's great. Let's stop killing people. But for me, having obviously looked into this for a very long time and seen how Israel is when it comes to ceasefires, whether it be in Gaza, whether it be in Lebanon or wherever else, they don't go, there's a ceasefire, right, cool, right, put your guns down, son. They go, there's a ceasefire on Saturday.
Yep.
Right, so they announce it on a Wednesday evening, but it doesn't come in to being until Saturday. Now, if I was a Palestinian and they announced a ceasefire, I would be terrified.
Yeah.
Reason being, as always, what Israel will do, and I'm sure the United States and the British and everyone else over the years would be exactly the same in this instance. It basically turns into an all-you-can-eat Chinese, where they've said to you, right, you've got an hour. You know how you are. Now, it sounds like I'm being flippant, but I'm not. It's actually an analogy that works. You would gorge on food, whereas they are gorging on death and destruction, and they've already done that. They spent yesterday evening bombing the hell out of Gaza straight after a ceasefire is announced, and they've killed 35 plus Palestinian civilians as a result of it, and that will carry on all day today, all day tomorrow, through Friday into whenever they go. And no, go on then, one more, and stop.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a case now of what can I get away with in the next 2 days? How much land can we get? How much influence can we get? And basically, how much can we decimate it?
Exactly. And that the joke of it is, obviously, on the face of it, like we say, it's great. A ceasefire is fantastic. Stop killing people. That should be the rule, really. But there's obviously going to be lots more to it. I think there's a political element in terms of the United States, because now both sides, left and right, Democrat and Republican, they can both claim victory for this, because the Democrats will say, look at Biden, he did that, he negotiated that. The Democrats negotiated peace in the Middle East. Brilliant, nothing to do with the last 16 months of hell. And then the Trump supporters, the Republicans, will say it's only happened because Trump made the threat that if if the hostages weren't released by the time he came into office, which is just a few days now, then all hell would break loose. So they'll both claim victory on that. The other element that I look at is I go, okay, so there's a ceasefire. So what are the terms of that? Now, the release of hostages is obviously a massive part of it. But for me, Israel doesn't care about the hostages anyway. Now, people might get offended by me saying that, but actually the people of Israel don't think they care about the hostages either, which is why they've been protesting Netanyahu's government for the last 16 months. Now, if you've got an area, a tiny area, Gaza, it's a tiny, tiny area, and you've got hostages in there, you wouldn't indiscriminately bomb the living hell out of it for 16 months.
Well, no, they actually haven't. They killed a couple of their own hostages. That was accepted.
Well, I'd be very surprised. And I was listening to the radio yesterday, and the brother of one of the hostages was saying, "We've got no idea if he's alive anyway, because there's never been any proof of life."
No, there hasn't. No.
You know, you've got hostages in an area which has been absolutely. I mean, you just need to look at the aerial footage of Gaza. It's been absolutely destroyed. So how many hostages are Israel getting back anyway? And the other thing is in terms of, we know that Israel wants Gaza. They want Gaza and they want the West Bank. That's not up for debate. No. They openly admit that. They want that. To the point where in 2019, Netanyahu was openly saying at a Likud party conference that actually we need to keep allowing this money to be funneled into Hamas, because that creates basically, it splits the West Bank and Gaza, and it prevents a united Palestine. So they don't want a united Palestine. Obviously, they want the land because, they think it belongs to them. They also, if we're honest, the Greater Israel project is not a theory. It's a very real thing, and it's spoken about. And there has been lots of photos of IDF soldiers in Gaza with the map of the Greater Israel on their uniforms. It's what they want. Now, that includes Lebanon, that includes Syria, it includes Jordan, it includes quite
a bit of Egypt.
A chunk of Egypt down to the Nile. It includes a section of Saudi Arabia and a part of Iraq as well, right? So we know that's what they want. Why would they allow Palestine to have any form of peace, any form of self-governance? Absolutely. They won't. So what you've got with Gaza now is you've basically got a destroyed place with 2 million either dead, injured, displaced, malnourished, or psychologically absolutely destroyed individuals. All the buildings are leveled. So what's the rebuild?
Yeah. And who does the rebuild?
And who does the rebuild? Exactly.
Who influences it?
Yeah. And also, if you're just going to go back to the status quo, which is Israel goes, okay, we're going to stop bombing you now, and that's it. Okay, well, how's Gaza going to rebuild? It isn't, right? So therefore, you're still going to have the starvation and impoverished people and desperation, and therefore, it ain't going to take long until a rocket comes flying or something happens where it all starts again.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And what will probably happen is they'll either replace him with a puppet, which I don't know what your take is on Abbas, but he don't seem to do a lot for the Palestinian people. No. He seems to be very controlled, and he also seems to be allowed to do what he does. He doesn't seem to be deemed a threat to Israel in the same way someone like Arafat was, where there was God knows how many assassination attempts. Yeah.
And I would say they killed
probably
him
did
in
in
the
the
end.
end. Yeah, he died in Egypt, didn't he? I think in the end. But they either replace him with a puppet, or they outright say, we're responsible for security, and it becomes basically like the West Bank is, where they go in and out whenever they want, they arrest people, they give land, they build settlements. It wouldn't shock me if they did that, got rid of the fence, and basically just incorporated it into Israel.
Yeah. Another thing that they've done with the West Bank, and they'll do this with Gaza, that 100% they'll do this. What they do on top of it is another thing, is they will create a military buffer zone. Yeah. Now that's sold by Netanyahu, as it generally is, for the safety of Israelis, right? We need to have this buffer zone, stop this happening again. Well, you could have defended your border in the first place, mate, and it wouldn't happen, but there you go. Now, that buffer zone is never into Israel. That buffer zone is always into Lebanon or into Syria or into Gaza or into the West Bank. So essentially, you steal the land and then say, oh, no, it's a military buffer zone. Oh, okay. And then roll forward 5-6 years. Hang on, there's quite a few condos and apartments in that military buffer zone all of a sudden. And then so it continues.
Well, yeah, then the buffer zone gets bigger. Yeah,
and in the end, you go, oh, mate, I'm sorry, we can't have a Palestinian state now because there's no land left.
When there isn't.
How did that happen?
People that talk about a two-state solution, just look at the land. There isn't any.
That's how you know someone's being dishonest. Yeah, that's why when the 10-watt light bulb, David Lammy comes out, as he still does, and says we need a two-state solution, that's how you know they're being dishonest, because they know, even someone as thick as David Lammy knows that is an impossibility. Yeah,
it is, because there's like you say, there's absolutely no land, and there's less and less, and the land that's there, particularly Gaza, is just decimated beyond belief. So absolutely, where would you start with that? Yeah. Right, we're going to move on to an interesting story here because, again, like we spoke about a story on Monday, and this was to do with the online harms bill, wasn't it? Where a sales pitch can be kind of justified in a sense, and you can have some sympathy with it, but what's the real agenda behind it? Yeah. So this is a story from Scandinavia up in Sweden. So Sweden plans to remove citizenship from people that it sees as a threat to the state. Now, on the surface, you could argue then and go, okay, so if you have people in the country who are terrorists, who are murderers, who are psychopaths, who are paedophiles, who are, doing things that, firstly, they should be in jail in theory, but they're doing things and they're never going to change. I can see some people having sympathy with that. And they're talking about dual citizens in particular here. And again, I think a lot of people would have some sympathy with that. Migrants that commit crimes should not be allowed to stay in the country. But this goes one step further, and this also feels like it's going to be a stalking horse, if you like. Because what is deemed a threat to the state? Because what's interesting is here, it doesn't say a threat to people, a threat to the country's population, the civilians of the country. It says a threat to the state. Now, we joked at the top of the show about Dad getting banned from Australia. When he had his ban from Europe, he was classed as a level 3 terrorist, basically, based on the threat to the state of Holland, and then obviously the wider Europe as a result.
A threat to the status quo.
Status quo,
rather than the state.
So he's not rocking in the free world, is he? He's stuck here. Yeah. So that was poor, sorry. But basically, who decides who a threat to the state is? That's what I think the key thing to look at here, because that can just get expanded and expanded and expanded in the same way that the online harms bill can get expanded from protecting kids from seeing, dangerous content, right up to people questioning vaccines, people questioning climate change, people calling for, general elected officials to do their jobs. That could be considered a threat to the state.
100%. Yeah.
So this I see as a sales pitch that you can probably go, okay, yeah, I can agree with that. I think a lot of people would get on board with this subject, that there should be, people deported and so on and stripped of citizenship. There's a big story here, obviously, with I forget her name. Is it
Shamima Begum.
Shamima Begum, that's it, who's had her citizenship revoked for joining ISIS. And there's a lot of, just very strong opinions on both sides on that argument. Now, I think in most cases, people would agree that was the right thing to do. However, with this feels like step one, doesn't it? It feels like this could just evolve more and more. And, where are we going to live?
Well, yeah. First of all, I will say that status quo didn't do rocking in the free world. They were rocking all over the world. That was status quo.
The free world's Neil Young, isn't it?
There we go. Oh. Neil Young, Mr. Vaccine, Neil Young.
Sorry.
But no, you're right. It's disconcertingly vague, as a lot of these things are. It's very, very similar to the new workers' reforms in the UK that Labour are putting in. Things are very vague, and that's done on purpose because then they can interpret it however they want. Now, for instance, if you come into a country, if you come into England and you're a convicted rapist or a convicted murderer or whatever, get the hell out.
Yeah,
be done.
Should never have been let in.
Should never have been let in. But you come in, I think you should actually serve your jail term here. Now, the reason why I say that, and I'll give an example. There was a volleyball player from Holland who lived in the UK, raped a girl in the UK, went to prison for raping a girl in the UK, and then was extradited to serve his sentence in Holland, where the rules at the time, I think they've changed now, where the rules were a lot more lenient. So he was released, and he competed in the Olympics representing the Netherlands, representing Holland, and he's a convicted rapist. Yep. So I personally think they should go to prison here. They should serve their sentence here with our justice system, and as soon as they're released, they're deported.
Well, to counter that, an argument would be, why are we paying for them? That would be an argument that people would put forward.
There is that, but at the same time, given the amount of money the government spaffs on other stuff, I would rather spend money to keep someone imprisoned here rather than send them back where they're released in no time and then they're back on the next dinghy doing it all over again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense completely. I watched a TV series a few months ago, actually, called Say Nothing. And it was all about the troubles in Northern Ireland. And it followed do you remember the Price sisters? The ones that were supposedly responsible for blowing up the Old Bailey during the IRA days. They were in prison here and they got extradited to prison in Ireland and then let out pretty quickly on humanitarian grounds. And I don't think they ever did anything again, but that's just an example of... Yeah. Obviously, that's a TV series on Disney+, so probably quite a fair bit of poetic license, but that's how it was shown. But I think that's a really emotive subject for people, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Especially at the moment here.
I mean, the thing is, it's like you say, you're going to get a lot of sympathy for that. Yes, I think you should remove citizenship from people that are convicted of doing heinous crimes if they're not, a citizen of your state. If it's a British person, they do it here. You're not deporting them. They're your problem. Unfortunately, they're British. But of course, because it is disconcertingly vague, they will expand that. Because actually, in terms of, I've seen it, in terms of, vaccine skeptics or climate change deniers and all that sort of stuff, that they actually do deem you as a threat, not just to the status quo, not just to the state, but actually to the population. Because you remember it during COVID. If you don't get your jab, you're killing granny.
Yeah.
If you deny climate change, then the world's going to boil and we're all going to die. And you're going to be responsible for spreading misinformation and taking away support from these much needed changes we need to implement to save the planet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a stalking horse.
It is one step further than that. Actually, it's funny. And this is in America. I remember a friend of mine who lives in one of the southern states was telling me a story that in America, if you have more than 2 weeks supplies, you're deemed a threat to the state. Which is hilarious because in America, because they have a lot of extreme weather, whether that be earthquakes or there be hurricanes, prepping's quite a big thing. But so a lot of people would have a hurricane shelter kit, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, apparently, if you have 2 weeks worth of supplies and you're prepped for if something hits the fan, then you're deemed a threat. Hilarious, isn't it?
Is this in the land of the free,
yeah,
Jamie?
Exactly. The land of the free and the
land
home
of the free and the home of the brave. Well, I always say this, if you have to keep telling people you're the land of the free, it's because it's not immediately obvious. Okay, moving on then. Ivor Chaplin, right? No, he's not a character in a sort of 1930s silent film. This is a real person.
I thought he invented the steam engine.
He's a former Labour Party MP, right? Now, he's not a small-level former Labour Party MP. He was an aide to war criminal Tony Blair. He served as his defence minister, Tony Blair's defence minister, and he was also the chairman of Jewish Labour. So he was a significant player within the Blair government. Man. He's a huge supporter of Starmer. Just last week, he was all over the mainstream media here in the UK, bemoaning Elon Musk. Obviously, we've got our views on Elon Musk, but bemoaning Elon Musk for picking on Starmer, and Starmer's a good guy and all this kind of stuff. So it would surprise people to see that actually just a few days ago, he was caught by citizen paedophile hunters in a paedophile sting.
Yeah.
And they caught him allegedly trying to meet up with a 15-year-old lad who, of course, is underage, to take that young lad to meet another gentleman. Right, that's the alleged crime. You can see the video of him after these paedophile hunters have got him because it's all filmed. It's all over X. You can see him defending himself and squirming as he seems to be. He then gets handcuffed and arrested, right, by the police, and he's released on bail. Now, of course, everyone is innocent till proven guilty. It doesn't look good, but if we're going to have a fair justice system, it has to count for everyone. So innocent till proven guilty. So there's a lot of issues within this country at the minute of having a two-tier justice system, two-tier care, right? Now, this guy has been caught in a paedophile sting. He's arrested. He's then bailed. Now, the people that wrote spicy tweets after Southport, they weren't bailed.
No.
They were denied bail.
Yep.
And they were given long prison sentences of 7 years, some of them, for social media posts or being seen to be aggressive towards the police or whatever, which is madness to me. But it gets worse, as these things often do. Now, bearing in mind he's been bailed on suspicion of, quite large suspicion, of, engaging in underage sex and all this kind of stuff, he's still got his mobile phone, right? He's still got his Twitter account. He's still got all his social media accounts. And the day he's released, he's then retweeting kids' football team tweets.
I saw that.
In Brighton, which is where he lives. He's commenting on pictures of young lads, which I think are probably overage, but not by much.
Topless and stuff like that.
Topless, and you can see, and on the post it says, retweet if you would like to see more. More being, the pecker. He's commented on that, going, "Great photo, lads." This is the day after he's bailed on suspicion of engaging in paedophilia, right? What is going on? It's like he's trolling, mate.
It's like he's got no fear.
He's got no fear because he knows he's going to be protected by the state, right? It's unbelievable. Now, to put into context, I've explained there the fact that people were sending spicy tweets after Southport and ended up in prison, rotting away in prison cells. Best of luck to them as well. And then you've got someone like Lawrence Fox, for instance, the actor Lawrence Fox, who's the head of the Reclaim Party. When he'd sent some tweets and stuff that were deemed, hate speech or whatever, and he was investigated for it, he had his laptop taken off him.
His kids' laptops,
his
phones,
kids' iPads and phones were taken off him. His phone was taken off him, right? And he was denied access to certain social media accounts. Now that's for sending tweets that annoyed someone. Okay, fine, whatever, it's a tweet. Now being under investigation, having been arrested and released on bail for allegedly being involved in paedophilic activities, and nothing. He's still got everything. And he's commenting on these pictures and he's retweeting kids' football teams. No wonder people in this country are freaking livid.
Yeah, it's dark because child abuse and paedophilia, that's the thing that generally unites people in the disgust, anger, and desire to do something about it. So it's a subject that is really, really dangerous for them. Hence why, if you remember, again, I think most people just want to protect children, even if they're not theirs. And if you remember through when they were rolling the COVID jab out, as soon as it got to kids, they were very careful because, again, people were starting to get very, hang on a minute. There's one thing going for adults, but going for kids. And it's this similar principle with politics, because in the last 15 years, since the widespread exposure of Savile and other politicians in the Ted Heath sort of era, you've got a much bigger connection between the subject of paedophilia and politics in general. There's a seediness to it. There's a sleaze to it that they've obviously tried. I think we discussed it first week. They've tried to brush under the carpet as if this all happened a long time ago and it's a few older people who have retired now. It's definitely not going on with current ministers, when I think, without naming any names, I think you'd be shocked. I'm shocked that if it wasn't still, at least involved in politics somewhere. So they've got to be very careful here, because if they let him go and this becomes a widespread story, I think you're going to get a lot of eyeballs on this again. So where he thinks he's protected and he's trolling and he's acting like he's just going to walk away, I wouldn't be so sure. Unless as we've always spoke, how high up the pecking order is he? How much does he know where the bodies are buried? How many other people could he implicate if he goes down? Because if that's the case, they'll either do one or two things. They'll either protect him or they get rid of him.
Or his car brakes will fail.
Yeah, exactly.
He'll fall off his penny farthing. But I mean, I also think, though, that the Labour government and Starmer particularly are so emboldened. I mean, he's an authoritarian moron.
Yeah, he is.
But they are so emboldened at the moment that I don't think they care.
No,
I'd
agree.
I don't think they care. Now, I think you're completely right in terms of the child abuse and paedophilia is what unites people. It's also what infests the establishment, full stop, and not just politics. Look at media. Look at the BBC's history, for crying out loud.
Look at the Grooming Gangs story. That's police, that's councils, that's local authorities.
All of them in on it, right? And so the thing is, paedophilia, child abuse, is used as a means, look at Epstein, it's used as a means the world over to control politicians, media, people of influence. It's used to control them. That's why Epstein had a camera in every single room of his house, so he could catch people and then he could use that to blackmail them. Yeah. Which is why, Epstein was Mossad. Why are American politicians over the years so sympathetic to Israel? Why do they do everything that Israel says? Well, maybe they're caught on a camera. Now, that's all throughout the establishment, right? This is infested within the establishment. And they need it because they use it to control politicians to get their way. But it is their Achilles heel. Because it doesn't matter whether you're left or right, up or down, whatever persuasion you are, politically, sexuality, colour, creed, whatever. If you've got kids, right? And you will unite on that. It's the one thing. And I honestly think it's what will bring the establishment down.
Yeah, I agree completely, because I think, anyone that's got any morality and anyone that's got any, sensitivity and heart and care, whether you've got kids or whether you're not, you want to look after them. You want to make sure they're protected. You want to make sure they're okay. You see a kid in distress in the street, you're always going to, you okay? Is your mum and dad around? Can I help you? That's just a natural thing that anyone or the vast majority of people would do. So like you say, it unites people. It really does. And I agree. I think it could be their Achilles heel. Hence why they've tried so hard to brush this under the carpet and make you look into the past rather than looking into the present, whether that be the scandals around politics in the 80s and 90s, whether that be the grooming gangs. They're trying to get you to look back. They don't want you to admit it and don't want you to realise this still happens today, probably on just as big a scale, if not a bigger scale. So,
having spoke to Raja Mir yesterday, the episode is going out on Sunday at 10 a.m. on Ickonic. He's been exposing the grooming gangs for 6 years now. You know, this is a guy that was part of the establishment. He's an OBE. Like, they loved him for what he was doing for community relations. Then he obviously started exposing the grooming gangs. All of a sudden, they don't like him anymore.
No.
And I said to him, you know, exactly what you've alluded to there, Jay. It's all very much in the past. When this was happening with the grooming gangs, and he was like, basically, let me stop you there. Not only is it still going on, it's bigger now than it was then.
Well, he said a conservative number of girls that have been abused, over 100,000, didn't he, across the country?
Conservative number of 100,000 victims of grooming gangs and rape gangs in the United Kingdom.
And they won't do an investigation into it. That tells you where their morals
because they're
are.
complicit.
They're complicit.
They're complicit. At very best, they're complicit by their silence.
And they still are. And the thing is, they talk about, you know, we need to move on, we need to get past what's happened. Well, an investigation into what's happening would expose if anything is still happening, because if there's police officers and council people and so on who covered it up, well, how many of those are still in positions of power, still doing exactly the same?
Exactly. And until all of these people, and I'm not just talking about the people that are organising the rape gangs and grooming the girls, but every single absolute scumbag, which we'll come to in the next story because there is a relation to it, absolute scumbag that queued up outside of those hotel room doors, paid their money and went in there to abuse these young drugged girls, until every single one of them is rotting in a jail cell, then no, we don't move beyond it. We don't put a line under it. Not a chance, mate.
100%. While those people are walking the streets, we don't stop talking about this story and demanding justice for them. So we're going to come on to a final story, which is, yeah, you say in some way connected in terms of the subject. And it's something I've been noticing, you know, we've chatted about it, and it's become more and more, you know, mainstream in the last few months. So you may have heard of a girl called Bonnie Blue, who is an OnlyFans influencer, and she claims to have slept with, you know, like 100 odd blokes in a day, and then she wanted to break the world record of over 1,000 blokes in 24-hour period. And you mentioned queuing up. You literally had people queuing up. They had to send in applications. They're queuing up outside hotel rooms and so on. You got fathers and sons. You got groups of mates. You got, you know, people of all ages. It's insane. Husbands, yeah, exactly. But you've got that on one level, and then in the last couple of weeks, particularly the last week, you've seen Andrew Tate. You know, a lot of the old videos that he spoke about, you know, that first got him into some hot water and people were first sharing when he first became well known, they've resurfaced again, where he's talking about beating up women, talking about strangling them, talking about, you know, hitting them if they don't do what he asks them to, X, Y, and Z. All of a sudden, they've both been promoted. And this girl, I personally speaking, I don't follow her. I've never searched for her. She's on Twitter all the time. She's on your feed. You see stories from her, whether they're from her channel, other channels. She's been on Good Morning Britain. She's been on This Morning. She's in the Daily Mail today. That's where I got this story from. So it's not just that this is happening, and, you know, do your own thing, mate. If those 1,000 blokes want to do it, she wants to do it, crack on. It's the promotion of it and how it's being put into the mainstream and encouraged, in a sense, people to digest this kind of content. And, you know, we've spoken for a long time, haven't we, about the destruction of the sort of nuclear family, the, you know, 2.4 kids in a family estate car, that kind of dynamic of, you know, a marriage and raising children together and having a sort of functional family with two parents, a healthy relationship and so on. And these two people, these two topics completely go into that. You know, Tate tweeted something earlier this week about basically men that don't want to have multiple kids with multiple women are pussies. And you're like, what the... And to be fair, can't stand the bloke, but Ben Shapiro's reply to that was brilliant, which is, how can all you people that support Christian values support this guy when he's saying things like that? And, you know, not a Christian at all, neither are you, but I think that the sort of sanctity of a family absolutely is still something we should strive for. As we all know, kids raised by two parents in a healthy relationship, that's a much better start in life. And, you know, a lot of people don't have a choice what you're born into. But if you could choose, most people would choose that scenario.
Yeah, of course.
And the fact that there's such an attack on this, and the fact that this is not only happening, because, you know, you mentioned when you were a kid, there was a similar kind of story.
It was 100 something then.
Yeah, they've stepped up.
In the 90s, we're in the thousands now.
But it wasn't in the paper every day. And I know you didn't have social media, but it wasn't in your face all the time. You know, every time I go on Twitter, like I say, I see something from, she's on a podcast somewhere, or someone else is on a podcast talking about these exact topics and how, you know, women need to behave like this and men should be able to do that. And it's, to me, it's not happening by accident. It's happening because they want to break down that nuclear family. And there's so many different angles of attack that they're doing on that. You know, you go back even as far as, you know, the Rockefellers wanting to get women in the workplace. Well, that broke up the family dynamic of, you know, women, the mum being the main caregiver of the child. Now,
and
so
they could
many
tax two people.
Yeah, it could tax two people. Now, and also it gives the state control of the kids at such a much younger age than it would have done.
Yeah, exactly.
And now all of a sudden you've got, you know, to live the same level of life that you would have lived in the 50s and 60s, both of you, unless you're lucky, both of you have to work. And both of you probably work more hours than you would have worked back then.
100%.
And it's all taking that family dynamic apart, whether it's time spent with your kids, whether it's time spent with your partner, whether it's, you know, just having that family connection. I mean, I don't know the stats, but how many families, for example, even have one meal together a day now? I bet it's a low percentage.
Yeah.
When that's a given, surely. That used to be the tradition.
You'd sit down and ask the kids about their day and you know, whatever. But that is you know, we try and do that, obviously. But,
yeah,
you know,
we're the same.
Quite old school. But I think it's about normalization. It's about desensitization for sure. I agree with you, Jay. I think it's about trying to attack the nuclear family and the traditional family values. Also, the respect. Because if you don't have respect for yourself, which, you know, like I say, she's free to do what she wants. Good luck to Bonnie, whatever her real name is. I don't know. But she's clearly not got a hell of a lot of self-respect.
And the lads.
That. And the lads with the bloody balaclavas on in the hallway, fluffing themselves, chatting with each other. You go next, son, going after you. And all that stuff. They've got no self-respect either. That's insane. So there's basically teaching a lack of self-respect. There's you know, like I say, desensitizing, normalizing this kind of behavior. And, you know, attacking the family unit. Now, the end goal, if we want to go full tinfoil hat, you know, we're talking Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, you know, State Farm hatcheries. They don't want mum and dad.
Yep.
They want, you know, basically kids born in essentially incubators to be raised by the state.
You know, the state-appointed guardian. They've talked about it, haven't they?
They've spoke about it. You then look at the normalization of this kind of stuff, the attack on the family unit, the absolute decimation of fertility and sperm counts. These things are all aligned. You know, to say sperm counts and Bonnie Blue are connected, but they are.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
In the sense that the end goal is the same.
They are. Respect is a massive point, a massive point. And, you know, you've got, if you think about as a young person, you're looking up for role models, you're looking up for influencers. And, you know, whether it's in, you know, the health industry that we're both interested in, half the influencers are just full of absolute crap that they're teaching people. You've got girls like this that younger girls would be looking up to. And that's the example they're being set. You've got, you know, men and women having a completely false example of what a healthy dynamic, healthy relationship looks like. And it's a really dangerous precedent. And as we said, this is not by accident. You've got so many different things that we've covered that all seem disconnected, whether it be, you know, Bovir in dairy products affecting fertility, and whether it be this, whether it be Andrew, but they do all intertwine. They all do the same thing, and that's break apart that nuclear family and lead us towards a kind of a time where there is no mum and dad, there is no natural procreation. And it sounds like a really big leap, but you've only got to look at their own words, and you've only got to look at all these things together and go, can see where the journey's taken us here.
Yeah, it's what people you know, are told to aspire to be. Simple as that. You know, X Factor and stuff like that. People were told what to aspire to be. Now, for me, as a, you know, an old guy now, you know, I aspire to be healthy and happy. That's the main two things. You know, if you've got your health, you're a millionaire. And if you've got a smile on your face, food in your belly, roof over your head, you know, you're halfway there.
You've definitely been smiling more recently.
I have been smiling more lately. Yeah, it's all the drugs. But with these guys, it's telling kids that, you know, basically you're worthless. You're a worthless piece of crap, really. But that doesn't matter because Bonnie's made a bucket load of money
and got a lot of attention.
A lot of money. Now, it doesn't matter why you get the attention, as long as you get attention. So then you crave it. It is like a drug. It's the dopamine hit you get every time you scroll through Facebook, even just to see if someone's called you a knobhead, which in my case is quite often.
Or a woman.
Or a woman, yeah. But also it's like you need to be rich. You need to have the fast cars.
Yep.
Once you've got the fast car, mate, once you've got that, everything's going to be okay. And it doesn't matter how you get it. Doesn't matter if you have to sleep with 1,000 guys. As long as you've got yourself a nice, you know, McLaren Sport F1 or whatever, you've made it. Okay, fine. Well, 99.99% of you are never going to get that. But the 0.001% that does get it, okay, mate, there you go. There's your McLaren F1. Are you happy? Because Andrew Tate's got all of that, and he's ranting on the internet every freaking day.
Yeah, exactly. And then you see this girl, she doesn't look happy at all. She looks like, I've got all this attention and I've got to keep it going. So I'm going to have to get more extreme and more extreme and more extreme. You know, if attention is all you want, like the whole thing, what's the advice if you want to be famous? Well, if you want to be famous for the sake of being famous, then do anything.
Yeah, well, that's the Ricky Gervais thing. When someone said to Ricky Gervais, what advice would you give to someone that wanted to be famous? And he said, kill a prostitute. And he got loads of grief for it. But the point stands. Because if all you want is to be famous, which is obviously what Bonnie wants, she wants money and fame at any cost, that's not a great lesson for kids. Like for me, fill your boots, mate. Fill everything, whatever. Do what you like. Because I believe in freedom. So you do what you like. But for that to be promoted to the youth, I don't think it's a good thing.
No, and it's definitely not done on accident.
No.
Right, that takes us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for joining us. Today's show was brought to you in association with Ape Nutrition, bringing British organic specialist food products on the supplement market. Head over to apenutrition.co.uk and use code Ickonic Media for 10% off. I'll be back in the morning with Rich, and you'll be back next week.
I'll be seeing you on Monday. Yeah. Cheers, Joe. Nice one, mate.